Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. Today, we're speaking to Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, someone that I wanted to talk to for a long time. Spoke to him a couple years ago. He was the first person that I interviewed from Israel 365. He's a senior reporter. And as you know, we've been covering the red heifers and trying to understand as much as we can about it, but there's all sorts of information out there and a lot of confusion. And recently I've seen Adam talking a lot about the red heifers. He is in contact with the people that are going to do the sacrifice. And so he's a very, very good source of information. He knows much more than probably anybody else about how things are going to happen. And so I figured, you know what, I'm going to reach out to him. I want to go directly to a reliable source and find out what we can about the sacrifice, because there's so many questions. And I have an entire list of questions submitted by you. I have some of my own. So we're just going to get it all answered and get this all ironed out. So
I want to point out, Jared, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And I've even seen a lot of your viewers watching my videos and commenting very nicely. There is so much misinformation out there, even lies, and a lot of it is very agenda driven, meaning it's anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. And from the secular, from the Christian religious, and even from the Jewish religious. So this is very important what we're doing.
Yeah, very good. And I guess that brings me to my first question. So Hamas attacking Israel. I covered that when that 100-day speech came out, where he was talking about, I want to ask you this. Do you think that that's really why they attacked Israel, or do you think it was the straw that broke the camel's back? Did it really factor in, do you think?
I'm not sure, and I'll tell you why. On one hand, as Rav Azaria Ariel said, Hamas doesn't need a reason to murder Jews. That's why they were established, was to murder Jews. They needed, on one hand, they needed an excuse to give the world to make it seem like we were guilty. So we incited them. So we're guilty. And that's horrible to say. However, I will say that what we've been hearing from the soldiers going down into Gaza is there's not a single house in Gaza that does not have an image. They call it Al-Aqsa, but it's actually the Dome of the Rock, which is Kublat Sakra, which is a different building. The Al-Aqsa is the gray dome, the dark black dome, that's on the southern end. So the people in Gaza have been inculcated with this. We have to stop. We have to kill the Jews because of Al-Aqsa. And they even named the attack the Al-Aqsa wave. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, I'm a little bit incredulous because they're going to attack us anyway. They've been shooting rockets at us for since we, even before we left Gaza. They don't need an excuse, but it may be. They're definitely focused on Al-Aqsa, on the Temple Mount.
Okay. Now, one thing that I did is I was trying to get a feel for how old the heifers were. And I came up with 3 sources of information. I had 2 of your articles, and then I had one from the Israel guys. They were interviewing somebody that was, working with the red heifers. And so I put together a spreadsheet trying to figure out, okay, based on the date of this article, they said that the heifers are this old. And it seemed like they started to, from what I can tell, they started to come of age around September of last year.
Yep.
So that's one thing that kind of coincides with the attack, because the attack is just a month after that, or a few weeks after that. So I don't know,
right.
I don't know.
That's actually a good observation. They came over in September of 22. Was it 22 or 23? It was 22, September of 22. And when they came over, they were 10, 11 months old. Older than that, they wouldn't have been able to ship them over. They're 5, so there's a little bit of a spread in the age. So yeah, you're right. It was about September of the following year, September, October. It was about the time of the attack when they came of age. But they have to be a minimum of 2 years and 1 month, because the Torah says it's a para aduma, a red cow. The word for a cow is para. The word for a calf is eglah. And the Torah talks about calves, and it also talks about cows, and it talks about a para ben shnatayim, that a cow is 2 years old. So they had to be a minimum of 2 years old and 1 month. And a lot of people have asked me, is there a maximum age? And to be honest, Ever since Mount Sinai, we've never had to ask that question. When they found the red heifer, if they needed it, they would look for it. If they found it, they would immediately sacrifice it. That's so we aren't, because for various reasons, all the finding a kosher Kohen. Also, in previous red heifers, they would mix the old ashes with the new ashes. We can't do that. We don't have the old ashes. So it's never happened before that we've let them go past the age. There is no expiration date at any upper age limit that I'm aware of. However, the longer they sit, the greater the chance that they will become unfit. If they grow non-red hairs, or if they develop a blemish, bump into the fence and cut themselves, they'll become unfit. So we don't know if there's an upper limit, but it's better to do it sooner rather than later. But they are of age, absolutely of age. And that's an interesting observation, that they came of age just about the time of the attack.
Yeah, a lot of us were really wanting to know, like, one of the big questions, and kind of the first question is like, when are they going to be sacrificed? Everybody wants to know that. And
Right.
myself and a lot of my subscribers, like, we went to it and tried to figure it out. One subscriber came across Shabbat Para, but when I looked into that, I was like, well, no, I think that that's just like a special Sabbath
Right.
to like kind of remind you, oh, Passover's next month, and remember to get purified. Another person observed that I think the first one, according to the Bible, was sacrificed on the 10th of Nisan. And so we were like, is that a day? And then I was like, oh, I don't know. Because now I don't know. I came across the CBS news story that was done that showed like a large ramp. And I have a question about ramp and like altars and stuff,
Okay.
but I'll save that for later. And then I saw in a story from CBN News, that Christian news site, and they had spoken to what's his name, Rabbi Momo, I think.
Rabbi Tzachi Mamo.
Yeah, and he was talking about Passover. So then I was like, oh, I guess that's the plan, is Passover. So
Okay.
two questions. Okay, so first of all, there's this question from Bob Smith. He says, is there a season or holiday that must be observed to sacrifice red heifer, or can they just be sacrificed as needed?
They can be sacrificed as needed. There's no special day for it. They actually cannot be sacrificed on the Sabbath or on a holiday. You can only do public time-bound sacrifices on those days. And the red heifer, it's technically not a sacrifice, because it's done outside of the temple. It's done, and you use the ashes. So it's technically not necessarily a sacrifice. If you would ask me 2 weeks ago, will the red heifer be sacrificed soon? I would have said absolutely not. Things are happening really fast. The Shabbat Parah, you're correct. It's a special Shabbat where we read the portion about the red heifer. It's read in the second half of the month of Adar, because the month after Adar is Nisan, when we celebrate Passover. And we needed to know about the red heifer, especially before Passover, because we were getting ready to bring the Passover offering, and we had to be purified in order to do that. So it was kind of like a reminder and a refresher course in how to be purified in order to bring the Passover offering. So is it going to be soon? I'm actually thinking that the Temple Institute is moving forward with that much more quickly than a lot of people realize. It's moving. It's not quite as organized as you would hope. When we found out the Temple Institute announced yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, Wednesday, yesterday afternoon, that they had found a kosher Kohen, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I called up Rav Makover, who's one of the rabbis running the Temple Institute, and Rabbi Zari Ariel, who's running the red heifer. And I said, they just announced that they found a Kohen. And they're like, we didn't know about that. And I was like, oh my gosh, things are moving forward very quickly.
That's so
Yeah.
crazy. Well, yeah, let's talk
Yeah.
about the Kohanim right now. Kohanim is the plural for priest. If you don't know, it's the descendants of Aaron on the down the patrilineal line. Um, Anyone else from the tribe of Levi would be a Levite, but they are the priest, the Kohanim. And so I had put together. We were talking about a spreadsheet before we started. I'd put together a spreadsheet of like trying to keep track of just all news having to do with preparations for the temple. And most
I'd
of it
love
is
to see
based on
that
your article.
spreadsheet, man. That's because there's a lot of information out there, not so much of it true. And I don't even get all the pieces, but there you
Yeah.
go.
Well, I try and I feel like I have good sense. I try and stick to, I think you would approve of my
I
sources
would approve. I would
because they're
approve, I'm
mostly
sure.
you. But part of that is there was like a part where they had put together like a registry of Kohanim, I suppose to like start training for the temple. And I guess I had that confused about like whether they would also be the ones that would do the red heifer. So this is news to me that there's only one right now that would be able
I've
to do the
heard
red
that
heifer.
there's 9. I've heard that there's 9. So let me explain. You're absolutely correct in your description of who the Kohanim are. Um, I don't think people outside the Jewish community appreciate how stringent we are about that tradition. When a Kohen is buried, there's it's always engraved in his gravestone this, which is how they give the priestly blessing. Every morning, during the morning prayers in the synagogue, the Kohanim go out of the synagogue, out of the prayer area. The Leviim wash their hands. The Kohanim go back in, and they bless the congregation like this every morning. They get a lot of special honors and special recognitions. They also have the restrictions. They're not allowed to marry a divorcee or a convert or a non-Jew. And if they do, their descendants are no longer Kohanim. They're not allowed to enter cemeteries. And this is what's important to the red heifer. The Temple Institute is looking to, since we don't have the ashes of the red heifer, anyone who ever goes into a hospital or goes into a cemetery, they're ritually impure by virtue of proximity to a dead body. And that is what the red heifer is to do, to remove that impurity. So they had to find a Kohen who had never been in a hospital. And of course, never been in a cemetery, which Kohanim are not permitted to do, which meant home birth, never any illness that kept you in the hospital, never go to visit anyone in the hospital. And that's kind of rare. So also they had to find a Kohen over the age of 15, because slaughtering a cow, you take a big knife and you run it across its neck. It's very difficult physically and spiritually. Slaughtering an animal is for the I can guarantee part of the training will be actually slaughtering animals, and a lot of people are not willing to do that. So they had to find someone willing and able to do that. So the registry was set up a bunch of years ago, and that was more to train Jewish men who were from the priestly heritage, the priestly ancestry, for the coming of the temple. But this is very specific and a lot more requirements. So I was very surprised yesterday afternoon when they announced that they showed a picture of a nice young man. They didn't give his name, but apparently that was a major hurdle and it's been overcome,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
was shocked at. That caught me by surprise.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all I've done is ever butchered chickens. We've done chickens. That took some getting used to, but then then I was okay. You get desensitized after a little bit. But doing like a cow, I couldn't imagine doing that. We're about to get some calves probably later this month, and I haven't gotten to the point where we've like butchered any, but we would take them to a butcher. But I've like pondered the idea, like, could I ever do that? I don't know. They're big animals. They're big.
They're
So
big animals,
let's
and
get to like
it's a big knife.
the actual not the sacrifice, but the ceremony. What is it actually going to look like? What one okay, let's start with this. One big thing I think there's a misconception about is like the altar, because in
Oof.
that CBS
Oof.
story they showed like a big white altar, and I had seen things on the Temple Institute website showing that the heifer was just like on a thing of like wood, like a pile of wood. So what is used to actually do the
Your
ceremony? An altar
your
or like a
ins
thing of wood?
your instincts are absolutely correct. The only place where Jews are permitted to do a sacrifice is in the altar, either in the tabernacle or after that. We're only permitted an altar that's on the Temple Mount that King David established. And so that altar, the first time people started sending me pictures of it saying, and I'm just like, what? And it wasn't CBS News where they said, oh, an altar has been prepared for the red heifer. There's so many problems with that statement. First of all, the red heifer is absolutely not sacrificed on an altar. The red heifer is sacrificed in its entirety. I mean, everything, nothing, the guts are not taken out, everything is burned. And it's burned on a big pyre of wood, a big pile of wood, tons of wood. That white altar that they showed is a model altar that was set up in a place called Mitzvah Yericho, which is way outside of Jerusalem, nowhere near the Temple Mount, nowhere near the Mount of Olives. It was set up as a demonstration model, especially for when they do the temple reenactments. It has nothing to do with the red heifer in any way, shape, or form. It's not even kosher as an altar. The altar, as we all know, is made of uncut stones. And that is not made of stone. It's made of metal and wood, but it's not made of stone. So that was beyond misinformation. I don't know why they printed, and it was crazy because in the article itself, they said it can only be sacrificed on the Mount of Olives, and then they show this structure that's in Mitzvah Yericho. So which one is it? So yeah, that altar, no, you don't need an altar. As a matter of fact, it is not done on an altar, and that particular white structure has nothing to do with the red heifer and nothing to do with the temple or the Temple Mount. To be honest, it's not even in Jerusalem.
Well, that's good to know. Part of my spreadsheet talking about the temple is I've like kept track of like every time that like a new altar for the temple had been mentioned, because it seems like from what I can tell, it seems like kind of like a smaller one was constructed first, and they kind of like did a couple more that were like
Right.
larger.
There was one altar that was prepared actually under the auspices of the Sanhedrin, which is no longer together, unfortunately. And it was made out of foamed concrete blocks. If you ever work in construction, I built my old former house out of it. And they built it on a frame so that it could be picked up, and it was much smaller. They could be picked up and put on the back of a truck. Why? Because if we get the word that we can start the sacrifices at the temple service, they can drive the truck right up onto the Temple Mount. There are roads that go up there. Drive it up there, take a crane, drop it down, and start the temple service. But to be honest, the altar is just a pile of rocks. We can just get 10, 15 strong young men, give them each a rock, say, run, we'll meet you up there, and use that as an altar. So there are several options for an altar. None of them are necessary for the red heifer. And as I said, the red heifer, it's not even going to come close to the Temple Mount. It's way out on the Mount of Olives.
Okay. That leads me to another question. The site on the Mount of Olives, I had emailed this to you before we did the interview. My understanding is that you have to be within sight of the Holy of Holies, like we call it in English, or what is it, Kodesh HaKodoshim in Hebrew.
Wow, you're good at this.
I'm trying to learn Hebrew. It's taken a long time, but I'm trying to do it.
God bless you, man.
But like you have to be in sight of that, right? And
Right.
from what I had seen before, people had proposed, oh no, the temple wasn't on the Temple Mount, it was over here, which I don't subscribe to that. I think that it was on the Temple Mount. But even on the Temple Mount, I've seen like kind of disagreements, like, was it actually here? Is it a little bit this way, a little bit that way? And so there's not really, like, they don't know exactly where it would be, or do they? And does that factor into where the ceremony would need to take place for the red heifer? Because you need to know like exactly where you're looking at.
I had a friend who used to work as a guide at the City of David. The City of David is close. It's down the hill from the Temple Mount. And she told me hundreds of times a day, people would go to the City of David and say, where's the remains of the temple? The City of David was King David's palace. There's 1,000%. 1,000%, the temple was on top of the Temple Mount. And if you go up there, you can see remains of the temple. And the Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are both built from the remains of the temple. They stole our material to build those buildings. And if you go up, one of the first things you see is remains of the columns that were from the temple. Not too much was taken down from there, and nothing was taken up there. So that was absolutely where the temple was. The dispute is where precisely was the Holy of Holies, and where precisely was the altar. And the disputes are really just about a couple of meters. There's not too much dispute. No one's saying, "Oh, it's not on the Temple Mount." No one who's seriously investigated it. That being said, there's in the Torah they say that the red heifer is burned outside of the camp. So when King David established the temple, some weird things happened to the tabernacle. It stood in Shiloh for 369 years, and then it got the Ark of the Covenant got stolen in battle, and then it was in a few other places for a little bit, and then it ended up when David consecrated the temple, they brought it up, or when Solomon rather consecrated the temple, they brought it up. So when you say outside of the camp in the Torah, what exactly are you talking about? So for thousands of years that the temple stood, how long did the temple stand? Both anyway, for all the times that the temple stood and they did the red heifer, it was done in the same spot on the Mount of Olives. And in order to perform that and have the Kohanim remain ritually pure and not perhaps step over bones or a dead body, or it was just very different back then. They actually built a stone bridge, that had arches that stopped the ritual impurity from going up to the bridge, and so there was a stone bridge to that specific spot, and that's where they did it. There have only been 9 red heifers between the time of Mount Sinai and the destruction of the temple, and there was enough ashes to keep going for another 400 years. But that's the spot that was used during the temple times. And from that spot, there's actually a discussion in the Talmud about you have to be able to see into the Holy of Holies, which kind of doesn't make sense, because in the first temple, there was a curtain, a wall, and in the second temple, there was a curtain. So the question is, and they were always closed. They never opened it up for public viewing. But it was more like in theory, and there was a question about whether you could see over the walls or through the arch into the Holy of Holies. But you have to be able. There was one specific spot on the Mount of Olives where you could look down and, in theory at least, see directly into the Holy of Holies, and that was the spot that was always used throughout the 2 temples to burn the red heifer. And they believe that that's the spot they have now. There was a lot of academic discussion and rabbinic discussion about where precisely that spot was. But Tzachi Mamo, God bless him, he bought that spot. and it's ours. There shouldn't be any controversy because it's not on the Temple Mount. What are you going to say? Jews can't do anything in Jerusalem? What's the deal? So they bought the spot. It's there. It's ready to go.
So he personally owns that spot, or was it purchased? Isn't he with Uvne? I think it's like Uvne Israel or something like that.
Boneh Israel is an interesting organization. God bless them, with Byron Stinson. It's Jews and Christians working under the supervision of the Temple Institute. I'm not sure. They keep their cards pretty close to they don't let everything out. Tzachi was known for years. The left wing hates him because Tzachi is an expert at buying land in Israel that the Arabs don't want us to have. So he was for years, which is not an easy thing to do. Like, you're talking shell corporations, a lot of smoke screens. And most of the smoke screens are to protect the Arabs who sell the land, because it's capital punishment in the Palestinian Authority if you sell land to a Jew. So he's an expert in buying land. So the land was purchased. I'm not sure exactly who owns it. I don't know where the money came from, but it is owned. Tzachi's used to working. I'm actually surprised that he's been shockingly public in the last couple months. I tried to interview him when the red heifers landed a year and a half ago, or yeah, a year and a half ago, and he said, "No, I don't do media." And for the last 6 months, he's been doing a lot of media. God bless him. That's why I think we're close. As Tzachi came out, and he's crowing and shouting, and that's an unusual thing for him. So
That leads to another question that I've had, many of my subscribers have had, but I'll ask the question posed by Wendy Burden. When the event takes place, will they be given security and protection to complete this sacred event?
well, I've also had the question, are the heifers protected? Because they're in Shiloh, which is in Samaria, Shomron, and it's surrounded by Arabs. I've spoken to the security people. They're, the real serious security guys, because they're always smiling. They're not like what you would think. I mean, what's the difference between a red heifer and a Jew? They'll kill one or the other. They don't care. They don't see the sanctity of the event. Will there be security? Sure, but we live with security. Security is our daily oxygen. It's they're shooting rockets at us all the time. I could walk out on the street and then bus stop and get murdered. That's what they do. So yes, there's security, but we do that. That's not a big deal.
I had read that the government was going to provide security. I don't know if that would be in the form of like the police or the IDF, probably the police, I would imagine. But then they didn't want it done. I can't remember where I read this. They didn't want it done during Passover. Because a lot of attention had been called to this.
Because
And
of
so,
Ramadan.
during
Because of
Ramadan.
Ramadan. That's why it's still Ramadan.
Ramadan's
I don't
almost
know.
over though, right? I think it's over
Right,
like the 9th or 10th or something like that.
right. Ramadan is almost over.
Okay, so that was their concern. It wasn't Passover because I think that's
That
what
was
the
also
article.
their concern. To be honest, from the very outset, when they started talking about bringing back the red heifers, they've been pretty secretive about it until now. One of the reasons they came out, I think, is because they're really close, and they're getting a lot of support. But there was concern in the beginning that there are very left-wing elements in the Israeli government, and I sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I apologize, but
No.
every settler, I use that term reluctantly, every settler knows that they would rather it didn't happen, because it's a huge political inconvenience if the temple comes back. Israel was established by anti-religious secular Jews, and there's still a big part of that. Netanyahu is not religious. He makes some religious shows he's a very astute biblical scholar, but he's not religious. He's a bit anti-religious, and he's not right-wing. He has right-wing parties in his coalition because Israel's 70% right-wing, but the left-wing elements in the Shin Bet, in the Secret Service, they have a whole division of the Secret Service just to deal with right-wing. They'll say right-wing extremists, but those would be the people who would take out the cows, kill them, but they're the ones also who are stopping any movement forward on the temple movement. They've put Rav Richman in jail. There's a huge element in the government because it's a political inconvenience. So the government, we're not so clear that they're on our side on this.
Yeah. But ultimately, do they need to be? Because just like how this Cohen just got found, something could change. Obviously, the Lord can do whatever he wants, and things can change like really quick. Like one thing that happened with us this month, well, no, sorry, in March, We had our first temple that we constructed in Kirtland, Ohio, and it fell out of the church's hands. It went to this like splinter group, and for like almost 200 years, it was in the hands of them. But then just one day, it was announced like our church, their church, they'd been talking about a deal for us to purchase it, and just one day out of the blue, it worked out, and it was announced, oh, we own the Kirtland Temple now, and that was shocking. And I'm shocked at like what you say about this Cohen that was just found, and who knows like what the next thing is going to be when it comes
Right.
to the temple in Jerusalem. Like
Also,
anything could happen.
there's been a huge paradigm shift among the Jewish people. Liberal Jews in America, most of them right after October 7th were in shock. And we're like, oh my gosh, all these people that we've been allying with and marching with and allied with politically, they're calling to gas the Jews. What's this about? They're calling for intifada. So the secular Jews have had an awakening. A lot of them have backslid. And in Israel, there is no backsliding. The anti-religious secular Jews, a lot of them are realizing we are the Jewish people. And so there is a strong movement, especially among the soldiers. There's an IDF patch that shows the temple. There's an IDF patch that says Mashiach now, Messiah now. And a lot of the soldiers, like I said, they go into Gaza, they go into the houses, they see these pictures of the Temple Mount, of the Dome of the Rock, and they're like, wow, this is what I'm fighting for. And also, even before the war, even before the October 7th, all of the surveys showed that much more than half of the Israelis said, you know, Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. You know, it's our religion, it's our country, and equality of religion, freedom of religion. We should let this. So there has been a shift, grassroots among the people, even among the not religious Israelis. Also among the soldiers. One of the most requested items is they have these tzitzit, the fringes, that are made for combat. And they ran out of them like crazy, and they're yeshiva boys who are just tying them as fast as they can, because the soldiers are down there and they're like, this is what we're fighting for. The Hamas knows what they're fighting for, so we better acknowledge that this is what we're fighting for. Temple Institute, they started giving out these images of the third temple, so people could put up in the houses, and they're like, this is like, if Hamas is going to put up pictures of Al-Aqsa in the houses, or actually the Dome of the Rock, we're going to fight that by putting up images of the temple in our houses. So this is very much what it's about. And I mean, we're coming up on a paradigm shift. As soon as the red heifer comes in, you've got, you know, I mean, what Jew would not want to become purified? You know, it's really, I mean, even without a temple, and also the temple, like I said, the temple service, you don't need an actual physical temple. When we came back from Babylonia, the temple service began immediately, even without a temple. So there's going to be a paradigm shift if this happens, like crazy. It's a new reality. It's a new reality. If you come up to anyone, you know, 150 years ago, yeah, there's a red heifer and Kohanim walking around in these clothes, they'd be like, what are you talking about? It's science fiction. It is an absolute paradigm shift. We're gearing up for, we're moving forward in very quick steps. It's happening quickly.
Well, let me ask you this. I have a question about this. So a while ago, and I'll probably interview him again. Here in Wichita, we have I have a friend, Rabbi Pepperstone, but he's of the conservative movement. And last time I talked to him, I was like, "So what do you think about like a temple being built in Jerusalem?" He's like, "Oh, there's like not really needed." I guess he has like a completely different idea about what's supposed to happen in the future. So, what do you think? What do you think would be the impact of successfully getting the ashes of the red heifer? What kind of impact do you think that would have on like the conservative movement and reform and reconstructionists and like over there?
Okay. As an Orthodox Jew, we have a concept called Eved Hashem, being a slave to God. When we were given the Torah at Mount Sinai, it says, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear it. Meaning, first we're going to do it, even if we don't understand it. Because if you took the time to learn from beginning to end all of the intricacies of any mitzvah, you'd never get around to it. And also part of the learning is actually doing it. It's the biblical commandments are experiential, especially stuff like Shabbat. You do Shabbat, you live through Shabbat, and it changes your how you understand the mitzvah, how you understand the Torah, how you understand the Bible, how you understand Hashem. But I'll tell you a story. My boss was on a plane flying back to Israel. He was sitting next to a Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jew. And the stewardess had a big silver cross on. She walked over. She looked at the Haredi Jew. She said, "You're a Jew?" And he said, he laughed. He said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "So you know all about the red heifer?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" Okay, there's exile Judaism, which the Reform movement, I think it was in 1880, they had a Philadelphia Resolution, I think it was called, where they said, we are no longer Zionists. We have nothing to do with the land of Israel. We are Americans, and on Saturday when we drive to the synagogue, we are Jews for the 2 hours that we pray there. And on Yom Kippur, we're Jews. But we're not connected to Israel. Israel is a huge stumbling block for the Jews who ignore Israel or reject Israel or don't want to come to Israel, or who choose that Israel is not on their political agenda. It's not important to them. This will be even more so for the temple, which is shocking because all of the covenants were explicitly about the land of Israel. And if you take out the temple service, well, you've taken out 2/3 of the Bible. And if you take out Israel, you've taken out 90% of the Bible. You're left with a few interesting phrases that have nothing to do with anything. So that's what I mean by a paradigm shift. There's going to be a paradigm shift for Jews. Jews who are ready for it, fantastic. Jews who are not, they're going to be hugely challenged. And we're not doing it to bring Messiah, because we don't bring Messiah. We do what we're told, and we were told in the Torah what to do. And God doesn't do what we tell him to do. We don't tell God, bring the Messiah now. We're required to believe that the Messiah will come. We're required to do the mitzvot, the commandments. And if the merit of our performing God's will brings the Messiah, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't, we keep doing the mitzvot. That's what we do. So these people who, for the most part, have also rejected the land of Israel and also rejected what we call Omachut Shemaim, the yoke of heaven, the requirement to be a slave of God and do his commandments, they've rejected all that. So I think, we have a tradition that there's a verse that says, Chamushim alu miMitzrayim, they came out armed from Egypt. But Chamushim comes from the word Chamesh. And so there's a midrash that says only 1/5, Chamesh means 5, 1/5 of the Jews came out of Egypt. 20% came out of Egypt, 80% stayed behind and died in the plague of darkness, but we certainly never heard from them again. And when the Yam Suf, when the Sea of Reeds closed, they were left in Egypt and couldn't get out. It's not an open door policy. And I think they're going to be left behind. Maybe after the Messiah comes, they'll get here, but they're taking themselves out of the story.
Yeah. So maybe some it'll dawn on them and they'll like really get excited about it. Maybe they'll like have a paradigm shift in their own belief. And then other ones, like you said, will probably just continue the way that they are.
Yeah, I don't think too many will get excited, to be honest.
No. Okay. Well, okay. Now here's the next one. This is a little bit more broad in scope. This is from the account, Those One Guys Incorporated. In his opinion, are people, I guess just in general, are people over or under reacting to the red heifer ceremony?
Ooh, I think people are reacting strongly. I don't think it's possible to overreact. This is huge. It hasn't happened in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And it started happening 5,000 years ago. So that's pretty big. What I've been, I don't want to say surprised. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't happen, but it's happening. I first want to say that there was I've been so blessed to see so many non-Jews who are so supportive of this and say, like stuff like, I want to see the glory of God. We have our disagreements about how that'll play out, of course, but for the time being, they love Israel, which is like, where did that come from? We haven't seen that in history. And, the opposite. So thank God for that. And hugely aware and supportive of what's happening. Unfortunately, there is a flip side, and not just from the Muslims. There are there are a lot of Christians who I don't even understand that this concept of the temple of the Antichrist, it is not a Jewish concept. We don't have it. People saying we're evil. I don't mind when people say, oh, it'll signal the coming of Jesus. I'm like, fantastic. Let's see. I'm just required to make it happen. And if Jesus shows up, well, we'll deal with that then. And if he doesn't, well, we'll deal with that then. But there are a lot of Christians who are amping up the hatred for Israel, amping up the hatred for Jews, straight up anti-Semitism. One of the most popular videos that I think has gotten over 1 million views about this is from a man who clearly knows absolutely nothing about the Bible or the biblical commandment or even what's happening in the news, knows nothing about it. But he just talks about how evil Israel and the Jews are and the Orthodox Jews. And we've been hearing that a lot throughout history from people. They use I'll be honest, I'll throw it on the table. They use Jesus as an excuse to hate on Jews. They hate on Jews, and then they start citing Jesus. Considering that Jesus was a Jew, I'm very perplexed by that. I don't understand it. I don't understand how that works. But there's been a lot of hating coming out from it, which, wow, that's deeply disturbing.
It's probably a lot of that kind of like tribalism type mentality, because probably with any religion you have those that are genuine, but then you have those that this is my team, and like so everything else, it's like black and white thinking, like
I
we're
think
all good, you're all bad, that kind of thing.
I think it goes deeper than that. Like, I was reading some of the comments and I'm like, you're saying that the red heifer is is evil. So what are you saying, that the Bible is evil? It's written in the Bible explicitly.
Yeah, that's
What are you
weird.
saying? Oh, the red heifer is evil, so God told us to do something evil. What is that about? God told us to do the temple sacrifices. It's evil. How do you do that?
Unfortunately, there are those people that, like, I think get too interested in YouTube, and I try and talk to my viewers about this all the time. Like, it's great to study these things that we talk about on this channel, but like you need to like understand the basics. You need to read the scriptures. Like, if there's like
Yes.
ignorance, like the red heifer is news to you, it shouldn't be, because like you said, it's in the Bible. So so
Exactly.
stop like always looking for exciting things, and like these more important things like learning the commandments, learning doctrines and stuff. Like, do that, like have a solid base. It's not as exciting, it's boring, or it not necessarily boring, but
So
like do that, like have a solid foundation, then you can kind of get into like some of the extra curricular type things.
I remember a bunch of years ago, the Sanhedrin had a creation concert. It was a concert, classical music, that was actually a Hallel, based on the collection of psalms that was sung in the temple. And they hired an orchestra, hired a conductor, and it was held in the southern wall of the Temple Mount. And there's tall walls around that. And they had Kohanim wearing the Kohanic garb, climbing along the ramparts with huge shofars, um, at night, shining spotlights on them. And I'm sitting down there looking at these Kohanim in the Kohanic dressing, blowing shofars. I was floored. I was on the floor to see the glory of the temple, to see the glory of the priests. Is I don't think there's any parallel in anything we've ever seen. People are talking about, oh, this concert or that star or that movie or that. No, you're talking about Kohanim, biblical Kohanim, who have been waiting 2,000 years to do this, who have dedicated their lineage, their family's ancestry to this, performing the mitzvahs as they were described in the Torah. It's stunning. It will change your reality. It will change your reality.
Agreed. let's I better hit up some of these other questions from other people.
Sure,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. It's just like it's such a great conversation. I like where we've gone. Um, but I do have a few more questions about the heifers. So, what one thing that I couldn't like get a handle of was how many there were because I through the different
Right.
sources I looked at, it seemed like there were maybe a couple different groups, and I think you had said five, and there currently three that are.
Well, all five of them are still together. Five of them were
Okay.
brought over to Israel. All along, they'd been checking out this one, checking out this one. When they check it out, they literally use a magnifying glass and go over the entire cow hair by hair,
Yeah.
which is, I was a dairy farmer. I looked at that. I'm like, you guys are nuts.
Yeah, I thought that too because I've had cows and I
Um,
can't really picture
so
doing that.
if you go to Shiloh, there are five, and those are the candidates that they're considering right now. Whether or not they're still kosher is a question. One of them was absolutely certified not kosher, though the non-red hairs could fall out. Just because they're kosher now doesn't mean they will be kosher when it comes time to do the ceremony. So there are five.
Okay. Five, but one has been disqualified.
Correct. Correct.
Um,
So they're
that
going to
was
check it again. They're going to check it again.
that was another thing about the hairs because I'd seen a number of different things about like okay, it can't be more than two, but then I heard something where it's like no, they cannot have any hairs that are not red. What is the so is it just not more than two?
Well, what does the Bible say, Jared? It says it shall have no hairs. Se'arot. Se'arot is plural.
Okay,
One hair is not plural. So one hair would be okay. Two
okay,
hairs, but I mean, we're dealing with issues that have not been dealt with for a long, long time. So when they were checking the cows, they had the question. You have two white hairs that are stuck together. Is that one hair or is that two hairs? They're dealing with a lot of questions, right? They're
yeah,
dealing, can you pluck them out? There's a lot of questions that have not been dealt with in 2000 years.
yeah.
I mean, like they had to transport them, they had to identify the cows, so they had to figure out how to put in RFID chips without leaving a mark.
Oh,
RFID chips are not from the Bible. So there are biblical bases, but these are modern questions.
yeah. I was talking to do you know Rabbi Gedalia Gerfine or Gerfine? I mean, have you heard of him?
No, no.
Well, Israel 365 set me up with him. He's Orthodox Jew rabbi. He put together a website called the People's Torah or the People's Talmud. And yeah, he was talking about how there's just like all sorts of like a lot of interesting legal discussions surrounding the red heifers. It seems like
Sure.
it's really, really intense, and we've talked about some of that here.
I'll give you
Um,
another question, another issue. When they were looking to find one, they asked the question, can we use genetic engineering?
wow.
Yeah.
Do they have an
Certainly
answer to
not.
that?
Well, they didn't even have it in the Talmud back then.
Yeah.
So they have to try to build a basis for it.
Okay, what about this? Well, no, okay. Oh my gosh, two things. I just keep getting questions in my head. Um, one, I figured when this happened, you would want to do it as soon as possible because
Right.
you don't want to like risk something changing. We've
Absolutely
waited
correct.
so long and anything could go wrong. So are trying to do this as soon as possible? Like I know that they're trying to be really careful and do everything correctly, but they don't want to wait too long, right?
You're absolutely correct. The longer they wait, the more chance that the cows will become unsuited. The flip side is, even like I said, this will be the 10th in all of human history. They want to make sure everything is perfect, perfect. So they had to find the perfect cows. They had to find the perfect, and the cows are only a small part of it. They had to find the perfect Kohen. They have to find the perfect spot. And they also have to build a bridge or a boardwalk to the place on the Mount of Olives, because the Mount of Olives is full of graves.
Oh, so
So,
they're gonna build a bridge?
yep, not a
Really?
big bridge, not a big bridge. Just has to be a little bit off the ground so that the Kohanim are not walking on graves.
Okay, well,
So
okay. Sorry if you hear the siren in the back. We're not under rocket attack here in Kansas. It's
I'm
I live
hoping
in a
I'm not
small
either.
town and they have like the dispatch. There's a volunteer fire department, and so they use the tornado siren thing to.
I'm in the Golan, and we've only actually been attacked by rockets once. That was close. It was a pretty,
Really? Just
yeah, yeah,
once?
yeah, just
Oh,
once.
well, that's
We've
good.
had, I think, 4 sirens. I'm in the safest place in Israel. We've had drones target us, but we actually only had rockets once because I'm in the eastern north of the country. Like I'm in the
Yeah.
extreme north. If I started walking right now, I could be in Syria in a couple hours. Um, but um, there are places that are much closer and they get hit a lot. Like Kiryat Shmona is on the western side. Kiryat Shmona and Sfat, Kiryat Shmona gets hit every single day. It's evacuated. It's a big city and it's evacuated.
Now, is your
Um,
family
I-
okay? Like, do you happen to be anybody in your family that's serving in the IDF or that's been, you haven't had any casualties, have you, in your family as a
Well,
result of this war?
I got married late, so my oldest daughter is my daughter is 21. She didn't do the army. She did national service because Orthodox girls generally do that. My son is doing a pre-army program. He's going to turn 19 this weekend. And I have 2 younger sons, so I don't have any kids in the army. You have families with 2, 3 boys in Gaza right now. Um, I know 2 of my dear friends who I was at their wedding. Their sons got wounded seriously. And these are the boys that I saw them when they came home from the hospital, and I saw them playing in the playground when they were little boys. One of them, I was laughing. I'm like, you always smacked your head. You always fell off the jungle gym and smacked. And now he's in the hospital from Gaza. Um, you got to understand, Israel's a small country. There's no one who hasn't been touched by this. Um, it's it's really, it was personal. It was personal. Though I served in the army a long time ago. I did reserve duty every year. I am so astounded at how motivated in a beautiful way the soldiers are. This is King David's army. These guys are going out, they have total clarity of purpose. They're out there to save their nation. I've seen soldiers in the army singing and dancing, even with one leg. Um, it's that kind of war. It's not a, oh, because of political. No, there's nothing political about this. Hamas is not political. Hamas wants us dead. And we saw that if we don't stop them, what they'll do. So the soldiers are very motivated and they're shooting rockets into our cities. We got to stop that.
Yeah.
Hezbollah has 150,000 high-tech rockets, not like Hamas rockets, aimed at us. And F-16s are flying overhead all the time up here because they're just pounding the heck out of them and they're firing rockets back at us. So that's the reality.
Yeah. We're gonna watch it closely. I'm glad that your family is safe. Hope it stays
Okay.
that way.
Thank God.
But I've always felt like since the war started, I think a lot of people did because it was really dramatic. Like this is not just like another war. It's more on the level of like the three wars, War of Independence, Yom Kippur War, and the 6 Day War, where it's like this is like a serious. It's not just like a
Yeah, yeah,
conflict
yeah,
or whatever.
absolutely. And it's a very spiritual battle. It's Mila Shem. I mean, the fact that we turned around and there are actually people calling for intifada and cheering on Hamas, it's like, do you really want to hold Satan's pitchfork? Is that really where you're where you're coming from? It's like there's no clearer evil than what these people did, and this is, you're justifying and say, oh no, it's about context. It's evil. It's evil. And there are people who, as clear as evil can be, they want to be there. It's astounding.
It was really bad. Yeah, I didn't want to keep watching the videos on X, but I couldn't like take myself away. I was like, is this real life? Is
This
this
is real.
really happening? I was like
I have
blown away.
one of my neighbors, is a very religious guy, and his daughter kind of left the religion. I think she's 19 years old now. And she was there at the Nova Festival, hiding in a car, watching Hamas guys walk around the car looking for people to kill, and she's listening to them, shooting and killing people, listening to other young women screaming. And she came back, and she's a very changed person. Oh my gosh. Um, yeah,
Those
like I
were
said,
some of the wildest scenes. Like one of the most haunting for me is when there were like I think probably a couple videos that showed, the them dancing and stuff and having a good time, but in the background you saw the paragliders
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
in.
yeah.
And like, how are you
And
supposed to know like what's going on? Like,
I listened to some of those phone calls and I'm like, God forbid a million times over, what would a father do? He gets a call from his kid saying, Abba, I'm hiding in the forest, but they're coming and they're going to get me. Abba, I love you. I'm like, what do you do? That's your kid. You
yeah,
held him in your arms. And then I hear the Hamas guy calling his parents, oh, Abba, I killed 10 Jews with my own hand. Is that how you raised your son? Is that the world you gave him? This is, it's very clear. And there's still people who choose evil, even if it's this clear. I don't, it's not the world I grew up in.
yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's go back to the heifers. I have a few more
Yeah,
questions.
sure. Sure.
Um, there were okay. Um, this is from Mindy from Temples of Jesus channel. Is there a plan to sacrifice? Okay, is there a plan to sacrifice? No, no, not from her. We already asked that. I'm sorry, Mindy. I already asked that question, but it
Not
was
a
fine.
problem.
I thought there was one. Oh yeah, okay. This is from Penny Tidwell. Will you sacrifice all that are worthy, or just a single one? If just a single one, what will become of the others?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not even sure the rabbis know. Though I will say there was an experiment by a professor Zohar Amar, I think his name was. I wrote about it a bunch of years ago. He actually did an experiment where he actually slaughtered a cow and burned it, according to the laws. One cow, I think it was enough for 600 billion or 6 billion, like billions of drops. Because you take the tiny bit of the ash, you put it in a big barrel of mikveh water, and then you take hyssop, which is thyme, I think it's called. In Israel, we call it zatar, and you sprinkle it, and that's how the. So we're talking about a tiny bit of ash, a lot of water, and a lot of the ashes can be wood. You put it on a big pile of wood. So one, I don't know if they're going to do all the cows. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't know yet either. The question is how many will be kosher when the time comes. But one of them is absolutely enough to purify the entire generation. Like I said, there have only been 9 cows throughout history, and that lasted from the time of Moses until the 4th century. So they don't need all of them. One of them is enough.
So you take a little bit of ash, you put it in a lot of water. Is there like a certain measurement, like how much
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
water?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wrote an article about it. And he did all the research. Really amazing work. And he said you can add a lot of wood. So
Okay,
yeah.
good. That's good. Um, and then that water with the ash in it, that's what you would use to purify each Jew, and also the instruments and the vessels
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the temple.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And how is it applied? I imagine it'd be done by like a Cohen.
Yeah, it would be done by a Cohen. He would take the and spritz it. And he becomes impure.
He
He
becomes
becomes
impure.
impure from doing that.
Okay.
The Cohen who does the red heifer, he becomes impure. The Rambam Maimonides calls it the most inexplicable commandment. It's called the chok, the chok of the red heifer. We have chukim and mishpatim. Mishpatim are mitzvahs that are understandable, like when you don't murder, don't kill, that don't steal. These we understand. Those are mishpatim, judgments. The red heifer is described in the Torah as a chok. Can't understand it. It's totally inexplicable. So there you go.
Okay. But just a little bit goes for a long ways then,
Yes.
as far as the ashes
We
go.
could one cow, we could absolutely easily purify the entire generation.
A generation like being how long would you say? Or do you think?
I think a couple of generations.
Really?
I mean, there aren't too many Jews.
Yeah.
There aren't too many Jews. How many? 10 million, I heard. And how many of them will want to come to the temple? 10 million when you can spritz a couple billion? That's pretty yeah.
Now the pure okay, say that you're coming up to Jerusalem, it's Passover. Where would you um have the ashes put on you? Would it be at the temple? Would it be just at that divide?
Probably.
I think it's called the Soreg. I don't know where.
Yeah. Probably in the area. Non-Jews don't have to do it.
Right.
Non-Jews cannot become ritually impure. So they also don't go up to the temple. They go up to the Soreg, as you said. But so I'm not really sure. I imagine it would be after the Soreg, as you're going up to the temple. And not all the Jews entered the temple, only if they had a reason to go into the temple to bring a sacrifice. So like when I meet you in Jerusalem and you walk up to me and say, Eliyahu, you know, I just had a son born and I am so thrilled that I want to bring a Thanksgiving offering to God to show him how joyous I am. Could you take it up for me? You'd hand it to me. I would go, I would get sprinkled, and then I would go up. So that's how it would work.
Now, isn't that one of the issues with going up to the temple? Because like I know that there's been some like different opinions about whether Jews should go up because you don't want to accidentally go into an area, not even just necessarily the sanctuary or the holy holies, but like the area when you're not
Right.
purified.
First of all, the areas that we're unsure of, the only areas that Jews are allowed to go in are the areas we're absolutely sure that we're permitted to go. And so to say, oh, you can't go up because we're not sure, it's kind of like, not really. That's not really true. Also, even the rabbis who, you have to be very careful when you read the rabbinic opinions that say you can't go up. They can't say you can't go up because the Bible tells us to go up. You know? And it's very much a case of, so if we don't go up, we've just handed it over to them. And we can't let that happen, you know, because then we'll never have the temple.
Yeah. Okay. And another question. Here it is. This is from David Woodruff. And I had heard this watching a video where I think his name is Byron Stinson, right?
Yeah, Byron was the one who he heads Bone Israel.
I think it was him that was saying that they would live stream it. The question from David Woodruff, is it going to be broadcast live or will it not because of the ongoing war?
I don't know, but I can't imagine it not being live streamed. It's not going to be done in a closed building. It will probably be live streamed by at least me.
Okay.
I'm going to be there.
Do it for us, Adam, please. We need to see it.
Yeah, sure.
This one cone, like, let's say that there's just him. Like, would he be the one to like walk the heifer to the spot and like do everything by himself?
I mean, he might get some help, but the other Kohanim would also have to be on that level of purity.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny. These are really technically difficult and good questions. I mean, I've been covering it for 7 years. There are just so many questions that have never been asked. And these are great questions. I believe he will probably be helped because, you know, what if the cow tries to run away? What if, you know, someone's got to hold it down?
Before. One of my cows got away and was in the neighborhood. I had to go chase it down, and I needed a couple guys to do that.
Right. So I can't imagine him being alone, though I haven't asked the rabbis that specific question. But these are all questions, you know, when you start thinking about it, there are a lot of questions about how to do this. And they've had to answer as many of them as they can.
Yeah. And thank you for doing this. Overall, like your general sense, do you think, like, what percentage do you think they have figured out? Like, or what percent do you think they still need to like work through? Like,
figured out, I'm pretty sure 90% is figured out. Solved, close to 90%. They've been working on it a long time. They've been looking for a red heifer for at least a dozen years. These red heifers have been in Israel for 2 years now, or a year and a half. We've been studying it for ever since the Torah was given. There's a whole section of the Mishnah about the red heifer. It's not new to us. So I'm pretty sure they have most of it figured out. Unfortunately, a lot of figuring it out happens in the actual doing of it. You got to pray it'll work out. They're not gonna let it happen if it's only halfway. It's got to be as close to 100% as we can physically do.
So that being said, you do feel like it could happen sooner than later? Like what's like the soonest that you think, if you were to guess,
If
that it could happen?
if you had asked me that earlier in the week, I would have said, "Oh no." After they found the Cohen, which was another large obstacle, I I would not have thought directly after Passover. Now I would be thrilled to be surprised and to be wrong. If people walk up to me after and say, "You were wrong," I'd be like, "Thank God I was wrong." I'm almost positive it won't happen on Passover. And I know that the people who said it would happen on Passover were basing that on bad information, misinformation. Um, like they were saying, "Oh, Shabbos of the Para, that's so it'll happen then." And there's a conference, so they'll do it at the conference. No, none of that is true. So with that being said, there, as you noted, there is an interest to do it sooner rather than later. And we don't, I mean, it's on the Mount of Olives. It doesn't have to be on the Temple Mount. We don't have to tell anyone. We just have to do it.
Do
I
you think
hope
it
they tell
would?
me because I want to be there.
Okay, like say that you wanted, not that this is what's going to happen, but if it was going to be done like in secret, would it be easy to do that without getting too much attention, do you think?
I think it would be, actually. I think it would be.
Okay.
I think they could do it in secret. If they have a strong enough interest to do it, if it meant doing it in secret or not doing it all, I think they could pull it off. Tzachi Mamo is a clever guy. And Byron Stinson is, God bless him, he knows how to get things done. He's done some pretty amazing things. He's a great guy. I love him. I love him dearly.
I
So
mean, the ashes are produced. They don't have like an expiration date, do they?
no,
They go as
no,
long as you have
not
it.
at all. Yeah.
Okay. That was a
The
question
question is
by
where to
Keller
store them.
Clements.
That'll probably be the Temple Institute will figure out a way to do that.
I would think you'd want to like once you have the ashes and the solution, you'd want to like probably divide it up between like a few different locations just to make sure,
Yeah.
right? Wouldn't you think? I
You
mean,
know, I want to emphasize we're a lot closer than people realize. I'm sorry to say this, but replacement theology means that a lot of Christians read the Bible as a parable, as a metaphor. We don't. We learn from it, but it's practical. It happened. It's a history book. It's a guidebook. Um, there was a Christian guy named Vendell Jones who started the Noahide movement in the 60s, and he was a very good amateur archaeologist, worked in Qumran. He discovered a vial of the persimmon oil that was used for anointing. And he also discovered a large cache of aromatic powder made of 11 spices. He discovered a ton, literally a ton of the temple incense that was stored in Qumran near the Dead Sea. And it's in someone's basement.
I didn't know that.
No one knows that. If we wanted to start the temple service, if the government said, okay, go ahead, it would take us literally 3 to 5 hours to start.
So you would use like
Everything's
that
ready.
that incense from all the way back then,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He found it in
wow.
Qumran by the Dead Sea.
And literally like about a ton.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's in his
gosh,
daughter's basement. It's
that's crazy.
crazy, crazy, dude. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's one man who they've designated to educate the priests, and he would probably serve as the Kohen Gadol, as the high priest. Everyone knows he's the one who knows the stuff.
Is it
So
Baruch Kohain? Is
Baruch
that?
Kahana, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Who it's very interesting. If anyone's ever heard of Meir Kahana of blessed memory, it's his nephew. Um, so I think it's his nephew. It's the same family, but everything's ready. Everything's ready. There's a concept in halacha of what we call lechatchila, which means the ideal way to do things, and then there's b'diavad, which means if it's not ideal, can you still do it? So it might not be lechatchila, it might not be the ideal way to do it, but we could have everything good enough. Like when the Hasmoneans took over the temple, they made a menorah out of I think it was wood or metal posts, metal spears stuck into the ground. It was not a golden menorah, but it was okay enough. So we are close enough to doing things okay enough to start the temple service in a couple of hours.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that answers
really
this question.
really that close. Really
Here's
that
the
close.
question by Lafitz Curse, if I'm pronouncing that right. What other preparations in addition to the sacrifice of the red heifer are being made to build the temple? So
Everything.
basically everything's ready to go right now.
All of the kalim, the utensils that are required for the temple service are ready. If you go to the old city in Jerusalem, you can see the golden menorah. We know who the Kohanim are. They have made their clothes. I was literally in a demonstration where I saw them make the tola'at shani, the crimson dye and dye wool. So the crimson dye is ready. Everything which you need for the red heifer. The red heifer is actually, it's one of the less necessary things. As we are sitting here today, even with ritual impurity, we should be doing all of the public time-bound offerings. We are required, as I am sitting here now, I am required to help bring the twice daily offerings, the Musaf offering, the additional offering on the holidays and on Shabbat, and also the Passover offering, which is if I don't bring I get carried, I get cut off from Israel. The only reason why I can't is because of the government. But we are required to do those things even while we're ritually impure. So everything is ready. Everything should be and could be done. At least on a not ideal level, but on a non-ideal level, we're ready and we're also required. It's not optional.
Yeah. So you could start going, and then the actual construction of the temple would take a while. I think it was you that did an article about someone that was starting to like make stones, like, okay, we're gonna start doing that.
He cut a few stones. He's an amazing rabbi, but he cut a few stones. That was about it. It was very sweet.
Do you think
But
those
we
would
don't
actually be
what is
used
it?
for the temple?
What?
Do you think those stones would actually be used for like once that gets going?
Why not?
Oh, I
Why
don't
not?
know. So yeah.
There was oh gosh, what was the verse? Was it in Haggai? The time is not, thus said the Lord of hosts. These people say the time has not yet come for rebuilding the house of Hashem, and the word of Hashem through the Navi Haggai continued. Is it a time for you to dwell in your paneled houses while this house is lying in ruins? That's exactly what we're living through today. What Haggai said, which is, what is this? Okay, we came back to Israel. Thank God. We planted everything. The deserts are blooming. Israel's got beautiful cities. We're high tech. Well, what about the house of God? We forgot about where he's going to live. He's homeless. God is homeless. That's horrible.
Okay, that is horrible. Yeah. I think probably the last question that I have for you, I just want to make sure I didn't like miss anybody. Okay, so there's a YouTube channel called Israel My Channel. I don't know if he's Jewish. I can't tell if he's
I don't know either. I saw the channel and I was I don't know about this. He's a nice guy, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. He's very enthusiastic about these things, and I guess he speaks Hebrew because it seems like he was able to watch the conference.
Right.
And I don't know if this was talked about at the conference, but is there the possibility, like in Judaism, would it be allowed to, for the meantime, construct the tabernacle in Shiloh, the Mishkan,
Yeah, no.
No? Okay.
As I said, once the temple was established in Jerusalem, there's no going back. It can't
Okay.
it can't be anywhere else. So no,
Okay.
we can't. I mean, the tabernacle was in Shiloh for 369 years, very long time. It's a very holy place, and even there, it was kind of like in this. It was like it was a tent in the desert and became semi-permanent in Shiloh, and then they had the horrible thing where they lost the Ark of the Tabernacle. But there's no going back. Once it was established in Jerusalem, that's it.
Okay. So that's it. So hopefully in the near future, maybe sometime after Passover, Pesach, we'll see it, and then everyone will get blown away. And
Maybe before, like I said, I would love for people to come up to me and say, "You were wrong." I'm like, "Yes, I was." You know, I would love it. It would be the best thing that ever happened to me for people to come up to me and tell me I was wrong. I would be thrilled.
well, let's end it on this. This is kind of similar, but what do you think the chances are, if not like immediately after Passover, what do you think the chances are this year, either Hebrew year
I
or
think
Gregorian year?
I think it on the condition that the cows are still kosher. I think it'll definitely happen this year. It'll definitely happen this year. And I'm reminded of when they moved the embassy to Jerusalem and they said, "Oh, war will start." No war. No war. If they wanted to wipe us out, they could have done it, and they can't. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I mean, that's speculation. And I didn't think it would, but I would love to be proven wrong. And it's looking like they're just, I mean, like I said, we're doing what we're told. And for now, that means just making it happen, you know?
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. By the way, everybody, he has his YouTube channel, so we can stay up to date with what he says there. I'll put the link for it in the description box below. Maybe we'll talk again sometime in the future, but this was really great to catch up under these
Thank
circumstances and
God.
just
Thank
talk
God.
about these exciting times.
Thank God.
So, all right,
Thank
guys,
God.
if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it because these things need to be clarified. There's a lot of people that are saying a lot of things, so we got like all these answers today. So please share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank God. Thank you.